Chapter 243. Boris Hunty took one step and gently placed his palm on the door. Memories of Isald using her spear flashed through his eyes. He squinted. "It's you." The rune-covered door meant an empty space, meaning when he found one, there was room to create his own night. Slowly but surely, the castle was opening up. It had to be because he was much closer to becoming king. Everything faded away as he opened his eyes in the real world and found himself back in the forest. His eyes, which were gleaming softly, reflected the grass beneath his feet. Something snapped in him after Isald's death, and that snap was the realization that all his life he's always been seeking peace. It had been his goal. Get stronger to stop the bullies, get stronger to help his mother, truly like a pawn. A reactor. If there was something he'd learnt from Gabriel, it was that he always made the move, always one step ahead. Always shrugging off the pressure of the world against the vagabonds. Maybe he could never be like that. Godfrey exhaled. As his thoughts slowly drifted, he kept walking. Cain had the strength to crush him. This fact was already obvious. Cain wanted the golden order, and to earn it, he had to become its true master. Only then can Cain bring him down and take ownership. In that case, Cain doesn't want me to die before then, but he's willing to harm everyone around me to achieve his goal. Godfrey exhaled softly, his hands still in his pockets as each step drew him further away from the mansion into the horizon of the bustling city. If Gabriel is right, this world for me is a prepared space. A volatile zone where I can't die but experience different sorts of pain until I get strong enough to be harvested. His eyes grew darker. Every face I see might be a clone. I'm being forced into doubt, into a state where I'm unstable. He shut his eyes. At this point, he was already on the sidewalk. Cars moved on the road, their lights and that of the street lamps kept the city bright. A lot of people were out. Pendragon Island was a popular tourist site, mostly due to the dragons and the fact that this was a city in a dungeon where the strongest family lived. Godfrey knew himself. He would never have chosen to walk on the streets like this without hiding his face, but now something in him just wanted to let loose. He hated this calmness in him, this solemn realization that he was being cultivated just to be harvested. Before, Godfrey thought he had his friends, he had paradise, he had people. Until Isald died. He finally realized this safety was a misconception. If Cain was alive and had a mother, no one would dare lay their hands on her. A whisper of his name would be enough to make a state bow. Step. He took one more step, stopped right under a street light and looked up. A man perched on the skyscraper across the street. His large build was backed by the stars in the sky as his eyes emitted a terrifying glow. Boris smirked while caressing his thick, gray beard. Others might stay away from Pendragon Island, but I'm not one to respect boundaries, especially when it has to do with such a worthy hunt. Boris' smirk grew wider. Both of them gazed at each other for a moment before Boris turned and left. Godfrey raised an eyebrow. The moment he turned his head away, Boris descended from the top of the skyscraper with both hands raised above his head. Golden armor crept up Godfrey's left feet up to his thigh before that leg moved like a whip. He kicked Boris right into an incoming bus. Boris tore through the bus and slammed the wall of a 2-story restaurant. The wall crumbled, but he landed on his 2 feet with one hand on the ground for support. Blood leaked from his mouth as he clutched his rib. I might have broken more than one, definitely more than one. His abrupt entrance sparked chaos. Customers that once enjoyed their meals now had terrified looks on their face as they saw the damage that led to the restaurant. Amongst them was a streamer, Nathan, the same man who grew famous after the Athens stream. He had just gotten here and was streaming himself eating in one of the city's best restaurants, only for a man to crash into the place. Nathan's irises shook at the sight of Boris. Isn't that the legendary summoner Boris? Nathan swiftly aimed his camera at Boris, who slowly rose to his feet and tightened his fists. I can't believe someone had the guts to attack the one man with the Minotaur King summon, the famous limitless summon. That's no different from asking for a death sentence. Nathan said rapidly as he made his way to a different place for a much better angle. There was barely any reasonable power in that kick, but I thought that would have been enough to bring him down. Godfrey thought as Boris walked out of the restaurant and a portal popped up. Not behind him, but at the central distance between both of them. A 13 feet tall brown-skinned minotaur with massive black horns, robust frame, and silver armor, famously said to be acquired in a dungeon world from the incredibly rare sun dwarves. The armor parts were arm guards and a battle skirt made of mail and plates above it. Silver plates to reinforce the horns and greaves to protect the minotaur's massive shins. Wait, is that who I think it is? Nathan's eyes bulged out at the sight of whom the Minotaur King faced. I've heard rumors that Isald Pendragon and Godfrey Daniels were an official thing according to the Pendragon's tradition, but his appearance here could mean this is really true. Then that means the strongest summoner in Russia is up against a grieving vagabond. Nathan gasped, his hands shivering. This was going to be a fight between two top-tier origin tiers. One could get stronger and stronger as he fought. It was said if he fought for long, he could rival the #1 summoner who has never tasted defeat. And that was why Boris summoned Blackhorn, known as the Limitless Summon, and even then he was ranked 5th. Nathan zoomed in on Godfrey's cold, yet calm eyes and shivered. I have a feeling this fight might not end up as we think. He whispered as lots of comments popped up on his screen. Boris stood at the top with a 23 origin tier summon, known for its disastrous might. Every part of the Minotaur King's body was a weapon. With such a summon by his side, Boris naturally had little to none to be afraid of. Godfrey's eyes unconsciously went to the people running away. They could already guess this was a clash between two powerful summoners. "Bet me, I'll kill you," Boris said with an intense glare as he grabbed a chair and sat. His minotaur slammed one fist into its palm. That casual blow caused a shockwave that made the asphalt road rupture. The pole of street lights bent, some twisting so bad they fell to the ground, their lamps shattering. We have barely 10 seconds before someone serious shows up. The fact that Arthur hasn't showed up yet means he won't. Tusk, boring, Boris thought, his eyes narrowing. You have 1 more second to decide on which knight you're going to send against my summon, Boris declared. I anticipated this. Godfrey looked around him from the corner of his eyes. There comes a point where you can disregard order. Instead, order respects you. That's the power of an origin tier. 1. Boris' voice rang, and the Minotaur appeared above Godfrey. Its arm bent back to unleash a devastating blow, one that could squash whatever stood in its path. As the fist drew closer, Godfrey's sclera became black, and his irises glowed with an intense gold light. A resounding boom echoed, and a dust mushroom went up, 3 stories tall. The asphalt didn't just crack but was pulled off the ground and sent piling up at the walls of buildings, most of which now had faulty foundations. Is this it? Godfrey said inwardly as the dust cleared, revealing how he stopped the Minotaur King's punch with 2 fingers covered in golden plates. Nathan was speechless at that sight. The comment section of his stream exploded like a nuke just detonated. What in the world, the 5th strongest summon was stopped with just 2 fingers? Snow, who watched from a distance, had an abrupt expression change. In a dark room, Tyla sat on her bed, watching the scene through her tablet, disbelief coursing through her very being. It almost felt like a lie that she was once looking down on this same young man. She bit her lower lips, asking why she was even watching this stream. Even with those questions, she still didn't leave. Godfrey, on the other hand, retrieved his arm the same time the Minotaur retrieved its own and clawed at his face. He evaded the claw strike, taking quick steps that brought him to the Minotaur King's side. Its eyes barely followed him, but its body wasn't fast enough to react. "Were you sent by Cain? Another test to overcome." Godfrey clenched his fist. The sound of his fingers snapping into place were like high-tension wires snapping due to extreme brute force or power. His fist swept out. The speed at which his hand moved shredded the sleeve of his top, but at the last moment his fist stopped an inch away from the Minotaur King's face. Everything around the Minotaur King shattered. Glass burst in a million pieces. Walls had so many cracks that a light touch might cause the building to collapse. "You chose the wrong night." His cold voice rang as he took back his arm and turned away. Boris chuckled. "I must admit you're the strongest opponent I've faced till date, but you've lost this fight." As he spoke, red veins bulged on his summon's flesh. It had already grown much stronger than when it threw that first blow. The Minotaur King appeared at Godfrey's back, both hands raised up, and it swung down. Dust burst outwardly as two buildings standing side by side fell. Nathan was curious to see what happened, but, to his shock, Boris spat a chunk of blood. The large man touched the blood with disbelief. A pair of golden gleaming eyes pierced through the fog. Nathan shivered. A faint silhouette formed as the individual drew closer. Then Nathan's eyes widened to the limit. He almost collapsed as Godfrey emerged, one hand holding a longsword, the other with the Minotaur King's head. He held one of its horns, came right to the edge of the restaurant, and tossed the head at Boris' feet. The dust slowly fatting behind revealed the still-standing body of the Minotaur King. "You wouldn't say I didn't warn you," Godfrey said softly as he turned and walked away. Dragon officers who had arrived at the scene stood aside as he walked away. Aye. In less than 10 seconds, the vagabond killed the limitless summon. One of the world's top 10 summons wasn't even a match to an 18-year-old summoner. Nathan's lips trembled. This was his greatest shock. He didn't even unleash his summon. Snow, who watched from afar, sighed. He went to the top of a skyscraper and exhaled heavily. That old fool had it coming. But that fight didn't even last 10 seconds, and it was obvious Godfrey massively outclassed the Minotaur. Just how in the world is he still this strong? In a dungeon, several individuals covered in black robes were at death's door. Their summons were either almost exhausted or wounded, and the reason was the great horde of beasts attacking them. At this point, they stood at the top of a snow-capped hill. Thousands of beasts charged at them, with many more dominating the skis, all because of the death of the primal stag, whose heart had been removed and they had used it on their god, but he was still dead. One of them fused with his fire-breathing giant and stormed down, eating, crushing, and stomping beasts. He finally clashed with a huge white gorilla while countless others attacked him. The flames billowing off the body of the giant was enough to kill many, but the summon and summoner were eventually swarmed and devoured. An entire monster region was furious at what these people had done. As more followers sacrificed themselves, what was once almost 100 reduced to a little more than a dozen. Just then, Cain's eyes snapped open. The last wounds on his body closed up, and he came out of the coffin. His nails were as long as claws and his hair so long that it covered his entire back. The moment he rose to his feet, his followers bowed. Cain's crimson eyes scanned everything around him. The sun changed, the sky darkened. Everything went dark, and a blood moon graced the sky with its eerie presence. Fear spread through the hearts of the beasts and his followers alike. "I live in this body once more." Cain slowly smiled as all the creatures shivered. "As I said, a true god never dies." A look. The personal aide of Pagoda Guild's guild master opened the door of a sleek black car and stepped out. He stood in the middle of a bamboo forest, located in one of the remote areas of Shanghai. Of course, this area remained remote because the man inside the bright mansion before him owns this entire space. No one could own private land in China, but that law weakened after the apocalypse. The strong held domains, but after the rise of the authorities and the strengthening of individual nations, laws came back. But there were some individuals who were immune to this rule, and one of them was the guild master of the Pagoda Guild, the most prominent guild in the world with lots of branches globally. The personal aide adjusted his coat and walked into the sitting. There was not one security guard. When he entered, he saw a man surrounded by candles in a massive sitting room which had no furniture. "Guild Master," the personal aide said to the man seated in a meditative pose. Candle light revealed his bare, muscular torso and the slow expansion of his muscles as he inhaled before opening his eyes. "I'm afraid we have bad news." "What happened?" Wang Alex, Pagoda's guild master, asked rather calmly. Then he raised an eyebrow. "Does it have anything to do with the gate in Antarctica? Did the other guilds fail?" "It doesn't. We barely just managed to get the origin tier summoner Boris to our headquarters. The outcome looked positive, but I just saw this." The personal aide stretched his phone over and Alex took it. His eyes reflected the scene on the screen. It was a golden-haired youth tossing the head of Boris summoned to his feet. "Is this real?" Alex asked softly. Boris was an opportunity to strengthen the guild branches in Russia, making them top one there. "It is. Boris is confirmed to be crippled as we speak. There's great unrest globally as the victor is a vagabond, a cohort made up of fugitives. This young man killed over 300 policemen when he was 16. 2 years later, he's slain Russia's strongest," the personal aide told the guild master. "Well, Boris wasn't an official member of the guild, so there is no need for a retaliation," Alex stated calmly. "There is a huge bounty on his head. It's worth over 2 billion for him and his mother," the personal aide stated. "We don't have time for this. Prepare the team for the demon dungeon that will soon open. A paragon-level red gate should be our focus," Alex replied. "Other top summoners will surely go after him. I'm worried the Axe General or Himari will hunt down this talent. The Axe General owns the strongest guild in London. If he moves with his elite team, Godfrey won't make it out alive. Why don't we try recruiting him? He's a great talent." Alex shook his head. "The authorities have bad blood with him. Going against them won't be favorable both with our relationship with the authorities and the public." "How about this?" The personal aide showed Alex another video. In this video, Alex saw Mrs. Athens' posts about the stream in her country and her positive view of the vagabonds. It had quite a lot of views and sparked lots of debates. "Oh," Alex raised an eyebrow. A few minutes later, his personal aide came out, tucked his hands into his pockets and looked at the sky. He exhaled. "Perfect life era. I would rather exchange that for a summoner who is a guild all on his own. He's the one summoner who's like that in this entire world. More than rare. I hope the guild master changes his mind. Once a paragon tier like him speaks, the tide is bound to change. After all, there are not more than 5 paragons alive." A week later, in the dawn of a new morning, a golden-haired man in a gray sweatshirt and pants jogged on the roadside. He left Pendragon Island that night and went to Amazon City. This was a city that only rose up after the apocalypse, but he knew this place more than any other place in the remaining states in the U.S. The U.S. now was nothing like it was 100 years ago. A lot has changed, and even Godfrey would not be able to recognize the U.S. of the past, but all these were irrelevant matters. While the entire globe still spoke about Boris' death, he hid in a property secretly owned by the Pendragons. It was a small house, one that Arthur forgot they had. They had first offered him a penthouse in a beautiful apartment complex, but he swiftly rejected it. Godfrey had no plans of being confined in one apartment for God knew how long. At least here he could jog early in the morning when no one walked the street. When he got back, Godfrey looked at the door to the apartment and sighed. How long will the alchemists take? He approached the door only for Solstice to open it. The general bowed a little. Godfrey walked into the room and blinked at the sight of Dirge wearing an apron over her armor. She held a tray with a steaming liquid in a cup. Tempest, Lysander, and Mountain stood side by side. It was obvious they were curious to see what Godfrey's reaction would be after tasting the coffee Dirge made. In their world they used rune stoves. That aside, few knights could boast of being exceptional when it came to cooking. In the Order, cooking was handled by cooks and them alone. "I told you guys that I'm okay," Godfrey replied. Maybe he should ditch this idea of letting his summons out at random. He sat down, looked at Dirge, and reluctantly took the coffee. He looked around and saw everyone staring intently at him. Solstice slowly shook his head. Godfrey sniffed it first, and the aroma was quite good, so he took a sip. The air grew tense at that moment. Even Lament, who remained in his soul space with his mount, could feel it. "It's surprisingly good," Godfrey said, breaking the ice. Dirge beamed. Seeing her smile made Godfrey feel better. For a knight who carried the dead with her all the time and sang to her fallen sisters, making her smile was quite fulfilling. He drank more and chuckled. "It took you 3 days, but you did it. You're quite talented, Dirge." "It's a pleasure to soothe your taste, my prince," Dirge bowed. It was an irony that the all-powerful unknown king was this little boy before them. It turned out that the king they trained so hard to serve was one they now protected and gave strength. It was late in Incheon, one of the most populated cities in South Korea. While Godfrey was starting his day, the moon had gone down in Korea, and the clock slowly ticked towards 8 o'clock. The dazzling lights from buildings, street lights, and vehicles lit up the city. Suddenly, a massive red gate, several stories tall and wider than the highway road, appeared. Dark crimson light painted the faces of drivers, passengers, pedestrians, and those inside the buildings. In an instant, their expressions changed. Pedestrians fled, car owners tried to reverse. Few succeeded, others who got stuck left their cars and fled. The gate loomed, its terrifying glow stretching to distant places. The military was swiftly dispatched to make sure civilians were moved away. The authorities had been expecting this gate and had even formed the Association of Origins to counter threats like this. Seconds became minutes and minutes became an hour. By then, barricades had been made, and Merlin fused with his summon, the Axe General, a hulking 15-foot-tall knight with 2 horns, a cross-shaped opening through the helmet, and a huge double-edged axe. He had flown in 2 days ago after the signal of mana fluctuations became high. It was stretched over a vast area, so they couldn't quite ascertain where the gate would have opened. Beside him were almost 100 men clad in dark gray armor, but they wielded different kinds of weapons. They were members of the Inquisition Guild, a guild made up of humanoid summoners who had to receive approval from the authorities. They had no entertainers, just combatants, and were not known by many since the guild did not broadcast itself. The Axe General was known to be impenetrable and huge, with a ridiculous perk being his great offense. This summon was immensely powerful, and that was why Merlin had the 3rd rank. Himari wore a kimono. Her white hair that ended with red strands fluttered gently along with the sleeves of her robes. A huge creature possessing white fur, a fox head, long limbs, a slender physique, and 9 red tails stood behind her. The 20-foot-tall beast bared its fangs at the red gate. Himari was ranked 4th out of the 10 strongest Origin tier summoners due to the beams her summon could unleash. Its destructive capabilities could move through entire cities to hit a particular target. Other Origin tiers that came over dominated the space behind, but with 2 of the strongest people on Earth who were close to the pinnacle of the Origin tier, there was ease in everyone's heart. They just wanted to see Himari and Merlin in action. For this, a helicopter with a cameraman hovered not too far away. This was an iconic scene. It was quite rare for the public to see figures like these in action, a gathering of the world's strongest. "This is a paragon-level dungeon. I thought the Pagoda Guild would be here," Merlin said. The hulking knight tilted his head towards Himari. "You mean Guild Master Alex Wang. It's impossible to get him here, even if he's more available than the other paragons," Himari told Merlin. "I see. Since we've all gathered, let's head in." Merlin lifted up the axe and his guild members marched behind him. As everyone approached the red gate, it suddenly turned black and a fierce aura blasted out from it. It generated a gale that blew everyone back. Merlin struck his axe into the ground and still slid 100 meters back. Himari's nine-tailed fox was ahead of him. With the claws of all four limbs stuck into the ground, it was able to remain in place while the others were blown backwards. "Prepare yourselves. An army will pour out of that gate any minute now." Merlin came out of his summon and bellowed. Agents aimed their guns at the gate. Armored trucks also aimed their machine guns and launchers, while the summons of summoners tensed up for combat. A few minutes passed, and nothing came out of the gate. Himari, who had retreated to the rear, frowned at this. She looked at Merlin, who fused back into his summon and took bold steps towards the gate. Just then something came out of the red gate, just one being. It was like shadows given the shape of a humanoid, with eyes equally dark as its body. This demon prince exhaled black misama, with a little red billowing off his body. Just one creature, or is that just the first one? Himari's thoughts were exactly what others had until it moved. It moved like a shadow. With a single step, the demon prince was already before Merlin, who reacted swiftly. He swung his axe at the demon prince, but it grabbed the axe, tightening its grip to the extent that its fingers dug into the axe. At the sight of this, Merlin headbutted the demon prince but staggered back. The demon prince grabbed the horns of the axe general's helmet and slammed his knees into it. The helmet caved inward. Himari's heart gave a hard, painful beat at that sight. Holding the same horn, the demon prince lifted and slammed the axe general into the ground twice before the nine-tailed fox stepped in. It spat a destructive beam at the demon prince, only for arms to come out of the floor, wrap around the fox's neck, and strangle it while pinning it to the ground. With a single wave of his hand, black and red misama billowed out like an ocean tide. It swept others away, forcing them to cough blood. As they did, they aged dramatically. The misama was a lethal poison, and this being emitted great loads of it. Himari retrieved her summon and resummoned it above the demon prince. It spat a beam that tore over 1,000 feet into the earth, but the demon prince was already behind her, taking the form of her own shadow. He snapped her head before she could activate a skill. The face of the man with the camera on the helicopter turned deathly pale. Merlin was still alive, but could he really be considered their hope at this point? A desolate realm with dark skies and hard black rocky ground was populated by dragons of different sizes and colors. Their intimidating draconic cries pierced the air as they soared magnificently. While this went on, some of the strongest stood in a circle breathing flames, and frost at one soul being in their midst. When they finally stopped, the flames slowly died down, revealing a beautiful pale-skinned girl lying stark naked on the ground. Her entire body had reverted back to normal, but her hair had changed. It now had a dark crimson hue. It was sprawled on the ground like blood as she lay on the ground, with a peaceful expression as one that was long dead. A few seconds passed. Some dragons approached, those flying landed, covering the vast land with winged, thick-scaled creatures. While all the dragons came down, 2 of them larger than the Boeing 747-8 aircraft, remained far above the clouds, yet their shadows loomed above the landmass. Their glowing eyes, larger than a grown man's head, were fixed on this fragile-looking human girl who had undergone the baptism of dragon fire. She had succeeded in the first part, which was enduring the flames and frost, She had succeeded in the second, which was absorbing the flames and frost, but now the third and final part was here, awakening with the mark of the mother of dragons. Only those that had the potential of bringing them back to the world of the flesh were elected for this esteemed position. In that tense moment, Isald's eyelids flew open, revealing a pair of glowing draconic eyes. She gasped, her body jerking as life flooded her soul once more, but this life was born of fire and ice. As she rose to her feet, all the dragons bowed their heads and their thoughts and desires flooded her mind. A pair of ocean blue eyes opened to see the huge petrified door. Godfrey pursed his lips. Every time he went asleep, his soul would come here in expectation. With a heavy sigh, he sat on the floor, leaning against a pillar so he could face the door. Solstice's footstep made him glance at the general from the corner of his eyes. "You can take my throne, my prince," Solstice offered, but Godfrey shook his head. "I'm quite comfortable right here," he smiled softly. Solstice walked to his side, unsheathed his swords, sat on the floor and dropped the swords by his sides. Godfrey looked at him and raised an eyebrow. "I rarely ask, but you've seen my world, so how's yours?" Solstice looked up. "It's too different to compare with yours, but I do admit that people of this world are quite weak overall, both in body and mind." "That observant, huh?" Godfrey chuckled. "But from them comes people like you," Solstice added. Before Godfrey could reply, rumbling sounds fell into his ears. He turned and saw the stone surface of the door breaking off and falling to the ground. The golden door behind was finally revealed as every single piece fell off. Godfrey quickly got to his feet, made his way to the door and pushed it open. The door swung inward, revealing a narrow hallway. On the left and right ends of the hallway were columns with the heads of different dragons. At the end of the hallway was another door, but there was a stone monument with ancient texts engraved. This was one of the few that Godfrey could interpret by default. He knew it stated the information of the knight behind the door. Name: Mother of Dragons, Knight General of the Golden Order. Type: unknown. Tier: 25. Potential: 30.1. Description: a soul who refused death, was baptized by the essence of dragons and resurrected as the mother of the near-extinct dragon race. This knight is a queen on a broken throne, an anomaly that should not be alive but exists by the unknown king's will. Can control her spear with her mind. Master of the spear. In blackout state, this general gains immense strength, beyond the average knight in blackout, and is able to summon as many dragons as she desires. This is Isald. Those tears are insane. Godfrey gasped visibly as he squatted to read the crimson text below. Next tiers. Paragon tier, 25-28. Progenitor tier, 28.1-32.5. Titled God, 32.6-40. His eyes narrowed. This ranking made him understand Isald had the potential of a top-level progenitor, and at her base state, she was already a paragon. A paragon. He rose to his feet and pushed the door open. As both doors went inward, a well-lit broad rectangular hall reflected in his eyes, and at the end of the hall was a dais on which a stone throne sat. A part of the backrest was broken off. A female knight sat on the throne with one leg crossed over the other. She nonchalantly leaned her head on one hand. She wore golden armor, and her dragon eyes pierced through the almond-shaped eye opening on the helmet. The armor was made to suit her figure with great emphasis on the claws of the gauntlet and the scale pattern of the armor. A gold ornament shaped like a dragon with an open mouth went around her collared cloak, like a dragon was around her neck. A golden spear was stuck into the floor right beside the throne, and arms reach away. The knight tilted her head even more, as if questioning his audacity to stand before her presence. Isald, what? Godfrey could barely finish his words when the female knight moved. Her crimson hair fluttered as she grabbed the spear, blitzed, and reappeared mid-air just at his right. Her spear mid-sweep for his neck. Her armor had turned black, eyes gleaming like that of a vengeful beast. Godfrey simply stood there, his eyes slowly following the spear, its bright gleam reflected in his ocean-blue eyes. The Black Knight was you all along, his thoughts rang in his head. Baleful voices rang consistently in her mind, blurring everything but an image sprung up. It was the vision she got of a Black Knight swinging her spear at Godfrey. It overlapped with her current action, pulling her mind out of the quagmire of the desires of countless dragons, giving her clarity. She couldn't exactly stop mid-swung, not when her spear was already so close, and she was hovering mid-air. However, chains sprung out, wrapping around the spear, her arms and feet. The chains came from the pillars and were able to suspend her mid-air, the spear tip barely an inch away from Godfrey's throat. "You should have dodged, you idiot," Isald screamed at the top of her lungs as tears burst out. Everything came to her at once. Her efforts in trying to stop the Black Knight was the catalyst that made her one. The Black Knight was her all along, and she almost killed Godfrey. Seeing him look at her with such softness made her cry even more. "Her name is Isald. Let her go," Godfrey said softly, and the chains loosened. The moment Isald's feet touched the ground, she let go of the spear and jumped into his embrace. Godfrey grunted. There was no softness, it was the opposite in fact. Her armor wasn't smooth, even the curve made for her bosom was harder than a rock. It hurt physically, but his heart once again bloomed with warmth, a kind only she could give. But there was a little dilemma. It was a bit hard to really know who hugged whom. Due to alchemical alterations, Isald was now a 7 feet tall, drop-dead gorgeous knight, in terms of her physique at least. Isald, as if she could read his mind, Isald altered her size and shrunk back to 170 cm. Her armor fell off and she stood on her bare feet with plain white clothes on. "Am I really alive?" Isald asked. Godfrey swiftly left his soul space. He appeared in his room and opened a portal. Isald walked out of it, her luscious red hair bouncing softly as she made careful steps to the bed. "I have enough mana to keep you out here for as long as you can imagine. You won't have to." Isald shuts Godfrey by pushing him to the bed. "Shut up," she whispered as she climbed the bed. A pair of ocean-blue eyes opened up in a dark room, still lying on the bed. Was it a dream? His emotions spiked as he checked the bed, but Isald wasn't there. The sound of the television made him head straight to the living room, where he found Isald using an antique old telephone he didn't even bother with since he came. She wore one of his tops, and as much as he would have loved to not see this, she also wore his boxers, but the words that came out of her mouth took her attention away from her dressing. "Mom, it's me, your daughter." In Pendragon Mansion, Christine, who was perplexed at the ringing telephone, was currently trembling when she heard the voice. Losing her children weighed on her immensely. The entire family was still mourning, but this voice. She couldn't mistake it. This same voice, memories she had with her daughter, had been ringing continuously in her mind. Isald, tears rolled down her eyes, new volume, the king. "Yes, sir, the demon paragon is out." The personal aide of Pagoda's guildmaster rushed out of his car and into the guildmaster's place. After searching the entire house, he found Alex feeding a goldfish in a small aquarium placed on a stool. Alex turned to his heavily panting side with a raised eyebrow. "The demon paragon is out, but it isn't in Beijing," the personal aide blurted out before even catching his breath. Alex's expression turned solemn. "Where is it?" The aide aimed his phone at the guild master's face. It was a video of what was currently going on in Incheon. The gate opened up in South Korea, and it's only one demon that came out, the personal aide said as he brought out a handkerchief to wipe the sweat on his face. Alex's eyes narrowed as he watched Merlin and Himmery hold back the demon paragon, although it seemed like they were just too difficult to kill. My heart skipped when the demon paragon snapped Himari's neck, but she was able to heal from that, and the axe general grows more durable with every damage he takes. They've been able to keep the paragon focused on them, but their battle has caused quite a lot of destruction in Yungu, Incheon, and those origin tier summoners can't last forever. Alex's personal aide added while pushing the phone forward. It's clear they've been fighting for a while. Where is Arthur Pendragon or Gamel? Alex asked. Gamel is in a dungeon and Arthur Pendragon still mourns his late daughter. It would be suicidal for anyone to speak to him concerning this. I doubt he even knows. Besides, it's best if a paragon tier summoner deals with a paragon tier demon. I'll go, Alex said and walked into the sitting room. His personal aide blinked several times, trying to understand if the guild master knew what he was up against and still walked so calmly. This was the first time he would be facing such a threat. His expressions didn't even change. He swiftly followed Alex and opened up a portal that led straight to Yungu, Incheon. Remain here, Alex said to him. His personal aide watched his guild master, who kept walking deeper down the deserted street as the portal grew smaller and smaller until it collapsed, and he couldn't see Alex anymore. Alex frowned. Although the battle was still far away, he possessed far sight and could still see it. The demon paragon must have had his fill with these ridiculously hard-to-kill origin tiers and was now out to make sure, by all means, it killed them. The demon paragon launched the axe general through a skyscraper, appearing behind him with his fingers clamped tightly on the helmet. With great force, it slammed the axe general into the ground, shattering a building and others around it. Nearly a kilometer was damaged by the impact. Himari, fused with her summon, blasted a beam which split into four, went into four different directions, and converged where the paragon was throwing blows that could tear through the durability of mountains at the axe general's head. Upon sensing the beam, the demon unleashed a great amount of ring-shaped misama. The beams collided at the center it was destined to hit and exploded, clearing off the misama, but the paragon was gone. Himari was just about to turn when a punch with a force that shattered half the skull of her fox launched her into the ruins of destroyed buildings. She struck the ground several times before skidding to a stop. The massive fox whimpered as her skull was fixed swiftly, but the paragon was there once more, throwing another punch. The air barrier collapsed due to the speed of the blow, but a sudden force slammed the paragon into the ground. It floated like a man in space, and suddenly slammed the ground even harder than before. The white fox's eyes widened at the sight of a 25 feet tall lion at the distance. It had violet skin, golden vein-like patterns, an intimidating head with an unruly dark red mane with some gray parts below its chin, and above by the side of its eyebrows. Two golden strands stood out from the red just above its face. From its unruly mane came out 9 other heads like a halo of heads around the main head. It had a glowing halo diagram behind it. It was impossible for anyone to miss this glowing circle over 20 feet tall. It had separate slots, each of which had a specific elemental symbol. Right now, just one was glowing. Gravity manipulation. There was a small man beside this enormous beast. He had a little goatee and pale skin, but his green eyes shone bright as that of his summons. Alex Wang, Himari gasped in her mind while being fused with her fox. With a furious roar, the demon paragon broke the hold. His eyes locked on the 10-headed lion and he launched toward it. The impact caused by the demon's foot shattered the earth and flipped the 20-foot 9-tailed fox over. It was like instant teleportation. One moment almost 700 meters existed between both paragons, but in the next, the demon paragon was already before Alex. Going straight for the summoner who had a weaker aura was a smart move, but the demon paragon's hand hit nothing but the air. Alex was suddenly behind it. It slashed as it turned, but Alex vanished once more. Then one of the lion's head elongated and chomped down at where the demon stood, but it was able to leap backwards on time. However, the other heads grew long necks and unleashed flames, while gravity forced one of the demon's knees to the ground. Yes, hundreds of South Koreans in subway trains, watching the fight with their phones, screamed out of joy. What was once a horror scene had changed in their favor. People at home hugged themselves as they watched all 9 heads engulf the demon paragon in flames. I can't believe that's Alex Wang, the guild master of Pagoda Guild. My goodness, I had almost lost hope. The anchor, who was at the verge of tears before, spoke up with renewed joy. They had live-streamed this battle because they had faith in the origin tears that showed up. But who would have known they wouldn't survive the misama billowing off the demon? And seeing Himari and Merlin go through immense pain just to keep the paragon focused on them made many emotional. Some had been crying until Alex's arrival. "That's a paragon tear, we have hope." The anchor's voice regained strength. Everyone was intent on the screen. No one even remembered if they were hungry previously or needed to release their bowels. If this battle was lost, Korea was doomed. Wiped off like those unfortunate countries that were decimated a century ago. In the battlefield, all the heads stopped breathing flames and watched as the flames died down, albeit slightly. The lion growled as it saw the demon paragon on his knees with embers billowing off its body. It looked badly burnt with its head hung low. Slow ticks rang, and the halo stopped at gravity once more. Then the lion lifted the demon off the ground, some drops of bright red blood rolling down its fingers, down to the scorched earth. It nullified the anti-gravity and multiplied it by many folds. A loud boom roared. The earth shook as if there was an earthquake, but when the dust cleared, the face of everyone watching changed. The demon paragon had transformed into an ox-headed humanoid with crimson eyes, a crimson ring attached to its nose, and a warhammer with crimson runes held tight. It supported the fall with the hammer and bent, but did not allow its knee to touch the ground, even though the right knee was quite close to the earth. It was still as dark, even darker than black, with red-tipped horns and a gray armor with a spike each at the pauldrons. As the demon paragon breathed out, thick misama burst out from his nostrils like it was an exhaust pipe. All 9 lion heads spat flames once more at this reborn threat, but the ox-headed demon flung the warhammer right through the thick torrent of flames. It struck the lion's main head, exploding a massive amount of misama while launching the lion nearly 200 meters away. The demon bolted forward, grabbed the hammer, spun and launched it once more. The other heads breathed flames, but the hammer pushed through and slammed the main head once more, forcing it to collapse. Growling furiously, the lion's halo switched, and it petrified the hammer before crushing it into dust. The ox-headed demon chuckled. It simply flexed its right arm, and another warhammer formed out of the misama that came out of its body. With a wave of its hand, massive pillars of misama burst out of the earth, rising high into the sky. Misama spread out, contaminating the air so much that everywhere one would look there were black particles. "Let me take over this fight, you've done well." Alex spoke from within his summon. He detached from it and something strange happened. His mighty summon transformed into what seemed to be a liquid form and coated his body. Alex grew a tail. His skin changed into that of his summon and golden vein patterns appeared on his body as a majestic red mane replaced his black hair. His short goatee also became red. Long claws came out of his fingers, and the head of his summon with all its 9 secondary heads appeared at his chest. A low yet incredibly deep growl left his mouth while his eyes were closed. The demon paragon launched his hammer. It tore through the air with a fiery surface due to the speed. The air barrier was long gone. The earth itself tore open due to the speed of the hammer. Alex's eyes snapped open at that moment and the halo spun to lightning. He moved, tilting his entire body to the right. In a state of slow motion, Alex observed the hammer before blitzing right to the demon, leaving a wake of crackling lightning. Alex tore through the demon's armor, right into its chest with his claws before kicking it 2 kilometers away. People were not able to follow the fight anymore, as the helicopter live streaming retreated due to the effects of the misama. When the demon recovered from the kick, Alex was already above. He inhaled and breathed flames enough to engulf a skyscraper. The demon paragon tried to move, but the earth held down his limbs, forcing him to face the horrific embrace of such flames. Alex proceeded to call forth lightning as the halo switched once more. He thrust the lightning through the demon's chest. All the misama pillars collapsed as the demon died. Right then, the halo behind Alex changed to an empty one, and the lion head on his chest opened its mouth. It sucked in the demon, and a new element took the space of the empty slot. With a soft exhale, Alex looked back at the destruction all around him. He was afraid Yungu had to be abandoned. This black misama was no different from the effect of a nuclear explosion, maybe even worse. It was unfortunate that many would be displaced, but at least the threat was gone. Alex watched the gate grow dimmer and dimmer before it vanished. He finally deactivated the eclipsal state and retrieved his summon to his soul space. At that moment, Alex snapped his head. There, on the rooftop of one of the spared buildings, a 2-story cafe shop, stood an individual with black hoodie. It looked like he came out for some sightseeing. Both of them glanced at each other. "Godfrey Daniels, you would have fought if I failed," Alex chuckled. "He's not as bad as they say, still cares about a country far away from his homeland, and I can tell he's already at my tier. What a monstrous youth." With a violet light, Godfrey vanished and reappeared in his apartment, sitting on a sofa while the young woman who made him go now showcasing tea she made with dirge. Godfrey exhaled helplessly. "I've gone to South Korea as she wanted. Even though someone else already beat the monster, why does it feel like she is trying to evade telling me the exact cause of her death? Isald." He squinted. "Why are you deliberately stalling?" A few hours later, Godfrey opened his eyes and groaned softly. "I slept off." He rose from the bed, barely able to remember when he left the bedroom to sleep. While scratching his head, Godfrey approached the door, but as he stretched his hand to open it, the knob twisted and the door was pushed in. Godfrey tilted his head, shrugged, and walked out as Lysander bowed. It was a bit odd to have his knights moving about. The treatment he'd been receiving was something he didn't expect. Had it not been for the school's stupid rules and that of the government, he might have kept them by his side all the time. At least now, with his access to about 10,000 Golden Order elite knights, having a few of them scattered all over this district made him feel quite calm. Right now, unknown to residents, Golden Order bow knights walked the streets and rooftops with their giant bows. Their ability to become invisible to all senses, including mana sense, made them literal walking ghosts. It would be almost impossible to catch him off guard. At the living room, he found Isald resting on the window sill. The windows were wide open, and the cool morning breeze brushed her face softly. It was quite early, a little past 3:00 a.m. The sky was still dark, but this darkness had its perk. The most obvious of it were the stars that filled the sky. His footsteps were light, but Isald still turned her face to him. With a soft smile, Godfrey strolled to her side and looked at the sky. There was a period of silence between them. Isald bit her lower lip, her head hung low. "I know this might not be how you want to start your day, but do you really not want vengeance for the one that killed you? Is there something I'm missing? I shouldn't be stuck up on what you've already left, but I can't leave if you don't give me a reason." Isald sighed, "Frey." She clenched her fists and her teeth even harder. Isald turned to face him. Seeing her concerned expression, Godfrey's eyebrows creased. This was about her, Why did it look like he was the one of concern here? Was she worried about him flaring up? Did this mean Snow was the one who killed her? Even without knowing it, his eyes grew cold. It was Cain. Isald's whisper made his eyes flash. So it was him. He clenched his teeth. But the hand that drove a hole through my chest might be someone you know. Godfrey heard his heartbeat. I believe you've met him with Percival in some sort of tower filled with books. Isald stopped herself as she saw Godfrey's expression morph into horror. Gabriel, the sound of his heart pounding at a quickened pace, was drowned by memories flooding in. The same man who told him the secret of Cain, who kept paradise safe from the authorities and the fanatics. What in the world was Isald saying? Every image of Gabriel in his mind was of a helpful man who had given him one of the most encouraging smiles and preserved his heart toward the public even when he was unwilling to help. It couldn't be. Gabriel's voice rang in his head about the seer who saw too much and died. Wasn't it the same thing that happened to Isald? Paradise was literally built under the watch of Gabriel. How could that same man be Cain's clone? How? Is he a clone? Godfrey stuttered. It had to be that Cain controlled him like he did his other clones. No, Cain's summon split his body. I think his symbiosis had a perfect 100%, so it naturally changed him. Cain is actually 4 different people. That man is one of them. Our headmaster is another. Isald explained softly. He has been manipulating the world for who knows how long. The more Isald spoke, the more cracks appeared in Godfrey's perspective of this world, or at least the world he thought he knew. Sebastian, the headmaster, was truly Cain, but he stopped Percival from wiping out Manhattan, countering the manipulation of Cain's fanatics. That same man protected him during his high school days and went into prison for his sake. He might have thought Cain was fighting himself, but it was obvious this was all just manipulation. Gabriel killed Isald. Snow couldn't recall anything and even considers himself a clone, all because Sebastian used his ability on him. His whole life was staged. They were toying with his emotions. What looked natural were all forged to mold him. Would he have been this way if Cain didn't exist? To think he ran to paradise thinking it was a safe place. The man he trusted with all his heart was Cain, and his mother was there, his friends were there. He thought taking them away from the reach of the authorities would make them safe. But right now, they were all stuck in a place he can't get into without Cain's permission. He was literally living in Cain's world all this time and growing like a pig given a home and food, who had no knowledge he would end up on someone's plate at the end of the day. My mother is there, Isald. That was the only thing he could say. Nothing else could leave his mouth. Everything seemed so fragile. He thought it was all under control as he got stronger, but it seemed as if he was even more vulnerable than when he hadn't even awakened. Every corner of the world, Cain has placed his flag of control. He was only within this created sphere. Godfrey had never felt so small in his life. He broke. Not even the fury of vengeance could grow in a man who realized everything he held were just dust. Godfrey stood there, his eyes wide, but not even Isald's face reflected in those once bright ocean blue eyes. Cain broke him. Was the next person he was going to trust be a part of Cain's plan? Was this life real? All he had done so far, what had it achieved? His mother, he dropped her in the lion's mouth. Frey. Isald slowly stretched her hand towards him, but Godfrey took a step back. His eyes moistened. It hurt deep within him that in the end he was the cause of Isald's death, his mother's hectic life. It hurt that even after everything, he was no different from a rat running within an enclosed box. The words that kept popping into his head had Cain's voice. Those words shaped him. The little he knew was what Gabriel told him. And now that same man was Cain. He didn't want to believe him anymore, but it seemed the only little knowledge within him was given by Gabriel. Godfrey yelled at himself within. Stop believing what he said. Was Cain truly after the Golden Order Knights, or was it another lie, another manipulation? Frey, we might actually have a... Isald couldn't finish her words as Godfrey exchanged himself with a Golden Order Knight. Isald bit her lower lip and bolted out the door, but no one was on the street. She understood how he felt. He had received hate from the world. Cain's personality stood for him. He might have even looked up to them only to realize this same person made the world how it was and was meticulously manipulating his emotions. Anyone could be Cain's clones. Trust was at its least. That was if it even existed anymore. What Isald feared wasn't his current state, but the decision he would take from henceforth. Her expression changed drastically when she remembered one of her paintings, the one she wrote vagabond with blood trailing downward. Everything began to fall into place right now. She had wondered what made him become that being in the painting. This was it. The darkness of the painting meant a desolate world. Not physically, but mentally. The trailing blood from the vagabond meant absolute brokenness with identity, even that of his last, a vagabond. In the end, the future didn't really change. She thought she saw and could control a little, but never knew she was actually the new catalyst. The change was necessary for a determined end. Everything she had done to stop him from being that person turned back to mock her. Fate had proven to be even bigger than its seers. Some prophecies couldn't be broken, no matter how much one tried. As Isald's heart pounded desperately in the street, the cold hard reality hit her. She had changed nothing at all. An end his mother's death should have brought, her own death brought it. Godfrey appeared on the rooftop of a 4-story building. He leaned on the railing, staring at the street with a lot in his mind. Time trickled by and he just stayed there, his face lacking expression as his eyes just stared ahead. He wanted to be a hero until he didn't want to anymore when the authorities turned against him. He wanted freedom and peace, but that was all a lie. There was no safe place. Every single place with order might have already been taken over by Cain, who fought himself on the surface to deceive the masses. He clenched his fist, his eyes gleaming brightly, but the intent behind it was darkness. After a while he unclenched his fist, fell to his butt and laid flat on the rooftop. His eyes slowly changed. Something changed within him. He could already hear inner voices doubting if the people inside this building he laid on were even real. Trust, it had shattered beyond repair. If there was nowhere outside Cain's control, then he would just have to break it all. Become an uncontainable existence. His eyes opened. His sclera had turned black, and his irises gained an intimidating shade of bright gold. Gabriel is Cain, a man I'm not supposed to trust, but he might be right. What he wants is the Golden Order. He wants me to grow, then I'll grow, but when the time comes, he'll be shocked at what he'll find. Godfrey rose to his feet. So be it. Nothing has really changed. Now that he knew the secret, Cain wasn't the only player. In fact, everything was perfect, just perfect for him. He was given a world to grow. Why not grow? The reason for his growth wasn't to achieve peace and rest anymore, but to become uncontainable. If he couldn't be contained, everything would shatter. Godfrey rose to his feet and exhaled softly. It's weird. I suddenly feel too aware that I now scrutinize my own emotions. He spoke to himself while gently clutching his chest. The castle brought back Isald, something Cain couldn't predict. That meant Cain was in over his head. The castle was bigger than him, bigger than everything it came across so far, and he was its master. He leapt down. At that moment, someone opened the door and was about to step out, but when he saw Godfrey's blackout eyes, he froze. Goosebumps rose up as the man stiffened. Although it was just a side glance, he felt like his soul itself shivered. This feeling was no different than stumbling into a lion in the forest. He held his chest after Godfrey walked past him. It's definitely him, the one who killed the limitless summon. I don't know what happened to make him like that, but calling the authorities would probably result in a slaughter. It's best if I mind my business. On the other hand, Godfrey just gained a mindset. It turned out control was just an attribute of being at the top. The very thing he loathed was now the route he would have to take. Control or be controlled, act or react, there was no other option. One kept a man safe, the other kept a man on survival's edge. When Godfrey got to his home and opened the door, he found Isald packing the living room. The moment their eyes met, she paused. Then she hurried over and hugged him, burying her face in his chest. "I'm fine," Godfrey caressed her hair. "I just needed to clear my head." Isald nodded softly, but she already saw his eyes. Godfrey only had those kinds of eyes when he faced a strong threat. Having them now when he wasn't in a battle meant Godfrey had considered every single moment a threat. He had become the man in the painting. "We should go to the island. They need to see you." Godfrey smiled softly. "But the authorities." "Enough hiding, Isald," he responded calmly. "It hasn't done much good so far." Quite late in the evening that same day, the butler opened the door and Isald, wearing a hoodie, walked in with a tall, golden-haired man 2 steps behind. The butler's hand on the door trembled when Godfrey glanced at him. Those eyes, it shook the core of the butler. Christine, who sat on the sofa drinking a cup of coffee in anxiety while waiting for her daughter, looked at Isald as she removed the hood, revealing her face. Christine's eyes moistened. She held back her tears as Isald fell into her arms. Her fingers trailed Isald's crimson hair, trembling softly. After caressing Isald for a while, Christine looked up and saw Godfrey. Her eyes slowly widened as she gazed at the man who sat on the sofa adjacent to hers. He crossed one leg above the other. There was a soft smile on his face, but she could sense something had changed about him. The same impression she got from that painting was what she felt from Godfrey right now. Arthur walked into the sitting room, his expression softening as he saw Isald. Then he looked at Godfrey and frowned. When their eyes met, Godfrey stood up, waited for Isald to have her reunion with her father before approaching him. "What happened?" Arthur asked as they left the sitting room and went to a balcony. Leaning against the railing, Godfrey looked at the forests with a placid expression. "Cain has 4 bodies. He killed Isald, he watches over paradise, he controls the authorities from the shadows, he's a god to the fanatics. Every single place there is order, he's involved and at the height of it." Arthur's eyebrows came together. "What about the last one?" he asked deeply. "I don't know, but my whole life has been a plot. If I'm supposed to believe what you said and what Gabriel said, then he's indeed after the Golden Order. I haven't seen anyone forcefully take another's summon, but you can't be too sure when it comes to Cain." Godfrey responded calmly. "What about your family? Do you need somewhere safe for your mother?" "Safe? There's no safe place. Your butler might be a clone who has no knowledge he can be used at any time. These people around you can turn against you on Cain's whims. Safety for a place is a misconception in this world." Godfrey's reply made Arthur frown. "Godfrey, if you see everyone as Cain's clones, your life will be a miserable one." "Then I guess you'll have to lose your wife first before your eyes open." Godfrey's reply made Arthur's eyes sharpen. Godfrey glanced at him, his golden irises gleaming softly as it showed no readable expression. "I was once the youngest widower on earth and I was the cause of her death. I keep running to places to feel safe. I won't do that anymore," he told Arthur. His eyes turned away. "The only leverage I have now is that he has no idea Isald is alive and that I know his secret. Barging into paradise to demand his head will make him deactivate his ability in paradise and send hordes of agents and fanatics after them. Cain won't kill me, but every other person he kills will only make me want to kill him even more, furthering my quest for strength which would give him what he desires. I'm in a cage of a world, and the only source of escape is to be bigger than the cage, to be uncontainable. Cain is obsessed with control. He loves watching as the world acts as he wants, That's what he's been doing with you and everyone else. He'll hate when things go contrary to his plans, and that one of those is if the world is against him. Arthur walked over and wrapped one hand around the railing. He discovered brute force will eventually cause him to fail. His old root is his weakness, and if we can push him back there, killing him is possible. If that happens, the clones are free and Earth will also be free of this plague of a man. Turn the world against Cain. Turn what he controls against him. Godfrey smirked as he turned to face Arthur. I think you meant to control what he controls and turn it against him. He looked away. 4 agents walked into a subway station. Everyone looked with different expressions as the armed men went straight to a woman and a little 12-year-old boy who were about to enter the train. Stop, one of the agents bellowed. Seeing them, the mother froze, her face paled. Her next reaction was to toss her child into the subway. An agent raised his pistol and shot at her leg, while the other summoned a huge bear that held the door that was about to close. It bent the thick metal and successfully ripped it out with a roar. The other 2 swiftly aimed their pistols at the 12-year-old boy. We know you're a humanoid summoner. Come slowly and we won't hurt you. People who were shocked at the cruelty shown to the woman had a change of expression when they heard the term humanoid summoner. Still, what's wrong with it? Humanoid summoners saved Athens. A girl in her early 20s whispered to her mother. Those ones can defect at any time. It's best if they go through the program like Axe General. Didn't you see his valiant sacrifice in South Korea? That boy's mother just wants her son to take the worst path, which would eventually end with him feeding other summons to whatever dreadful thing he awakened. Her mother replied. Suddenly, a portal opened and a truck drove into the scene. Isaac shot web strings and stuck 2 agents to the ceiling while Lucy slammed the ground, and it cracked with extreme heat billowing off the broken slabs and the cracks below. It displaced the other 2. Arden looked out of the driver's window. Bring them in. Lucy rushed toward the boy, while Isaac lifted up the boy's mother. While everyone was shocked by the vagabond's arrival, someone walked out of their midst, heading straight for Lucy and Isaac. Arden brought out a pistol, her eyes gleaming behind the golden round glasses she wore as she pressed the trigger. She felt threatened by him, and that was a rare king-tier bullet, but this man raised a hand that looked completely made out of gold and caught it. He smiled. I'm not here to fight. I'm Ronald Daniels, Godfrey's father, and I want to see my family. A man who was recording the whole thing gasped. The world isn't going to believe this. Is that really Ronald Daniels? 7 figures stood outside a swirling blue gate. There were quite some people around with agents safeguarding the gate and doing registrations. This was a high-tier gate that just opened up 2 months ago. It had been cleared several times. It was the turn of their team to join that record of those who completely cleared it. Kai, a brown-haired man, turned back to face his team. All 6 of them looked at him with solemn faces. Amongst them was a young man with red hair, bright green eyes, and great looks that made people around them take a second glance. He was Paul, just graduated 2 years ago and joined their team for this raid. This dungeon, though just a high tier, had feral wolves that hunted in packs and was said to have a demon-corrupted boss. So far this dungeon had only been cleared 6 times. Only great teams could do that, and Kai wanted his team to score that achievement. His team was made up of 3 females and 3 males. One of the females was married, the same for 2 of the men. You know your job, right? Kai tilted his head toward Paul, who dutifully carried a heavy backpack. This was Paul's first mission into a high-tier dungeon. He needed this to gain a smooth entrance into the Pagoda Guild as a high-tier summoner. He would prove his skills and gain access to the top guild worldwide. If not, at least he could score a good spot in the Justice Guild. He would be lying if he wasn't charmed by the vice guildmaster of that guild, but the coolness of Pagoda Guild's guildmaster swayed him. I've never seen what a plant summoner can do with my own eyes. You'll be an eye-opener." Karen, the married woman who had blonde hair, said while looking at Paul, who became stiffer. "He'll be of good help, right, Rose boy?" Josh, one of the married men with a robust physique and full beard, patted Paul's shoulder. The other man, who had a lean physique and clean-shaven chin, sighed. "Can we go in now?" "We can." Kai turned. They all followed him through the blue swirling mass and found themselves in a heavily snowing forest. "Good thing we knew of the terrain beforehand. It's freezing here." Lois, one of the young girls in the team with a baseball cap and a braided ponytail, said. Paul looked at her pretty face from the corner of his eyes. When she looked over, he snapped to another location, staring intensely as if he saw something over there. "Is anything there?" Lois asked. When Paul discovered everyone looking at him, he cleared his throat. "There's nothing there." "This is embarrassing." The sound of wolves growling made Paul look up. Ahead of them were almost a dozen white wolves with red claws and red fur around their eyes and the tips of their ears. Josh unleashed a huge bear who clashed head-on with two wolves. The slim man summoned a green snake whose venom paralyzed the wolves, allowing Karen, Lois, and the last girl to kill them. Karen's summon was a huge Komodo dragon whose tough skin was immune to the wolves' claws and fangs. The Komodo dragon had quite a deadly venom that had been transformed into an advanced skill. The effect was revealed instantly as the wolves died. The venom burnt them from the inside. Lois summoned a bald eagle, which gracefully tore the wolves it targeted to death. The last girl, who had a condor, fought alongside her. It took a minute, and the wolves were dead. Paul was awestruck. The team leader didn't even act. "Impressed? Wait until you see what Mr. Kai can do," Lois said as they continued their journey. Paul wouldn't deny that he felt quite lucky she decided to stay at the back and was even speaking to him. "What's his summon?" "It's an odd one, an elemental summon." Lois gestured for him to lean over and whispered into his ears. Paul's eyes widened, but his cheeks reddened for a different reason. "He's on the verge of breaking into the Lord tier. Mr. Kai is cool." Hearing Lois say that made Paul feel a bit jealous. He wanted to be that strong. 2 days went by in a flash, and they had gone deep into the forest, killing lots of wolves. Luckily, no one was injured due to their teamwork, but Paul had not seen any other use he had other than carrying the bag filled with their rations and tents. He also held some of their souvenirs. They were already close to the boss. Paul quietly gave up on his dreams. When they finally saw the wolf boss, it rested with over a dozen high-tier wolves and was a mid-level Lord-tier existence according to their gauge device. "That's absurd." Paul's eyes widened to the limit when he saw that, but from the looks everyone had, this wasn't a recent development. They knew beforehand. "This is where you become useful, Paul." Kai, who had not fought since they entered this dungeon, turned to him. "That wolf can control gravity around a limited area. The roots of your summon can get to it from a safe range. The rest of us can't. Once it gets close, let your rose tree open its petals and unleash its poison right at its face." After hearing Kai's plan, Paul burst into laughter. However, it died down when he saw that no one else was laughing at this ridiculous plan. "My summon's poison can't kill that wolf. It also has gravity control. It will crush my summon. Even if it was poisoned, that beast can still kill my summon," Paul explained erratically. These people were ridiculous. "We're here with you. Once the poison is delivered, I'll defend your summon from the wolf's attack because you might not be swift enough to retrieve your summon," Kai replied calmly. "I don't think anyone can," Kai mused internally. Paul instinctively looked at Lois, and she nodded at him. "I guess this is my big moment. I'll face the risk," Paul said within him and summoned a 10-foot-tall rose tree. The snow cracked as the roots moved through the ground and burst out. It shot thorns from its branches, piercing the high tiers around the wolf boss. The boss pinned the roots that had wrapped others with gravity and dashed for the rose tree. All the roots that burst out of the earth were brought down to the ground by the furious pull of gravity, allowing the wolf boss to close the distance. The roses on the tree bloomed, unleashing a crimson mist into the air. It enveloped a 2-meter range around the rose tree. Unfortunately for the wolf boss, it was in the midst of this. Its eyes gleamed as thorns burst out of its body. Knowing it might not survive this, the wolf pounced at the tree, clawing right through it and biting the branches and roses in dying fury. Paul couldn't even react. With all his heart, he expected Kai to defend him. He couldn't even react to the speed at which the wolf cut the trunk of the tree into two. Blood spurted out of his mouth. His vision blurred as he fell to his knees. Then he dropped sideways, eyes wide with disbelief as his team finally came out of hiding. Lois, who hid beside him, stood up. She looked a bit sad, but she knew all along. "It's eaten enough. There's no way it'll survive," Karen said as they all gathered, watching as long spikes burst out of the mouth, head, and every other part of the wolf boss. What a gruesome poison. After seeing what this thing can do to whoever eats the flowers of a dying rose tree summon after the poison, I knew this kid would earn us big, Karen said while Paul took soft, dying breaths, his eyes quivering at what he heard. "I don't think he's going to survive that," Lois said. "The loss of his summon might kill him." "Better," Kai replied. "We'll just fill the form and state a reason for his death. It's not like he's the first person to die in a dungeon," he added. "We need the head of that thing. Cut it off. We also need." Everything faded into darkness for Paul. No one saw a strange flower burst out of the snow and sneak into Paul's body. "Do you want vengeance?" A voice rang in Paul's subconsciousness. His eyes opened in his soul space, and he could sense something outside the barrier. "I can grant you vengeance. What do you say?" Kill them all." While the team focused on the wolf, they heard a sound forcing all of them to turn to Paul's corpse. Before their very eyes, it transformed to a wood-like texture. His hair became leaves, shocking them greatly. Finally, a pair of bright green eyes opened, but this wasn't Paul. It was the paragon of MC who had come seeking the human that killed his general. Unknown to Aryan, the same being that kept his wife and her team hostage in a maze of ever-changing swamp forest had returned, this time with a way to enter Earth without triggering a dungeon break. The question for this Saturday was, rank the 6 strongest existences in this story according to abilities or feats. You may send your replies in the server. Thank you. The eyes of everyone on the team changed as Paul's clothes tore. It was unable to contain his new physique. His body had grown to 8 feet. Barks and leaves now made a cloth-like armor. "What's that?" Lois freaked out as the paragon's green irises surrounded by a black sclera locked on them. "That," he tilted his head, his transformation reaching the end as his leaves formed a battle skirt. A massive long-hilted greatsword grew out of his arm. "I am Melvin, the sole paragon of my kind, and I believe this is a dungeon that leads to Earth," Melvin asked. While he spoke, Kai and his team could hear great trembling in the forest. Something was forming there, and they guessed this being knew what was going on. "That boy was possessed," Karen whispered as she took slow steps backwards. "Die, you monster," Josh roared, opening a portal beside Melvin. His high-tier bear leaped out, fangs and claws ready to tear the paragon of MC into pieces. Unfortunately, it did not go as Josh expected as Melvin grabbed the bear's neck, lifted the beast weighing over 2 tons like it was nothing, and tossed it into the woods. The next thing the team heard was crunching sounds. Blood poured out of Josh's mouth. In terror, he saw 2 massive green eyes in the depths of the forest. As it drew closer, a dragon made of several trees and flowers reflected in his eyes. Karen's eyes widened to the limit. What in the world? Kai swiftly summoned a small ball made of rocks. It had 2 eyes, and at Kai's command, it launched toward the paragon, growing from a small ball into a boulder the size of a bungalow. "Humans?" Melvin's voice rang as he sliced the boulder into 4 parts, killing the summon instantly. That was Kai's greatest skill, his last resort, and it was brushed aside so casually. As he bled, it dawned on him that this being was far beyond their tier. "You are a fascinating bunch," Melvin concluded. Lois, the condor girl, Karen, and the man summoning the snake fled. Lois took to the skis with the condor girl right behind her. But to Lois' shock, she saw flowers bloom out of the girl's eyes. She fell off her condor. Small flower trees burst out of her, growing so quickly that the girl couldn't be recognized before she hit the ground. Lois's face paled, sweat covering her entire body while her arms trembled. Her bald eagle kept flying higher and higher. Lois' keen vision allowed her to see Karen and the snake man running for their lives, but flowers suddenly burst out of the snake summoner's fingers, shocking him greatly. A small tree sprouted out of his shoulder as he screamed. Karen's heart almost gave up at the sight of this. Tears filled her heart as she urged her summon to run even faster. Lois covered her lips. She knew Karen wouldn't survive. When the eagle burst through the clouds, relief settled in Lois' heart. While she was checking her body, a wood dragon burst out, the white fog sinking into its massive mouth as it loomed over Lois. It devoured Lois and her bird with a menacing crunch. Midair, the dragon unleashed a roar that rippled through the sky. In a huge cavern, members of Gate Defender's top team watched one woman face off against a divine tier boss. Lotus' pink hair fluttered as she stood on a boulder, her 12-foot-tall, 12-foot-tall orchid mantis beside her. Both of them faced the 21-foot-tall Spider Queen. The moment the Spider Queen scuttled toward them, Lotus' summon blitzed right past it, leaving pink flowers fluttering in the air as the spider's 8 legs were slashed off. It screamed in pain, but was silenced by the mantis blade piercing through its head. "This is unbelievable. So this is what a special mana fruit can do." A guild member admired Lotus. She was now Gate Defender's Eliza after being invited by the mana tree and receiving a mana fruit. It evolved her summon into a lethal divine tier creature with the potential of an origin tier. Lotus' contract was swiftly changed, making her one of the highest-paid combatants in the region, and such treatment was to be expected. There were billions on Earth, but a little more than 100 origin tier summoners. Their rarity was off the charts. Using Lotus as their brand would take the guild to new heights, and that was the reason this fight against this dungeon boss was being recorded. Lotus' debut to the world had been shoved to the sidelines because of the Red Gate at South Korea, but with more videos popping up, Lotus would become a global figure like Eliza, and even better due to her potential. "Any idea why the tree chose her?" Falco asked Charles. "Who knows why that tree does what it does? It's a good thing she decided to stick with us and not run off to other guilds trying to poach her," he replied. "She does have a thing for the vagabond boy, though. I guess seeing him single-handedly handle Brooklyn's crisis changed her. She's been training harder since then," Charles added. "You mean him, Tusk? That boy is definitely favored by the mana tree. There's no way he grows so fast. That sort of absurd potential doesn't exist," Falco scoffed. Charles eyed him. "I also doubt he could have grown to such an extent without the tree. It's just not possible. Even if he adjusted after the Great Vanishing, being able to kill the limitless summon can only be explained by a mana fruit. But being favored is also a strength." Falco sighed dismissively. When they came out of the dungeon, with the logistics team going in to bring out the corpses, both men saw Lotus making a call. After lowering the phone from her ear, she approached them. "My brother called. He's about to enter a dungeon, and I promised to be with him for his first raid." "Why can't the brat just join us?" Falco scowled. "Don't overstress yourself," Charles smiled. Lotus giggled. It's just a high-tier dungeon. I'll be back soon." A few minutes later, two young boys in their late teens stood outside a blue gate with lots of other people. Some sold necessities like food, water, bags, coats, and weapons. Some teams just chatted amongst themselves, while the gate was guarded by agents. "Where's your sister?" Ren's friend asked. Ren, who was Lotus' younger brother, glared at him. "I said she's coming. She just cleared a peak-level divine tier dungeon with her team all right." "Wow, Tilda, she's beyond cool." Ren's friend had infatuation written all over his face. Just then a jeep drove over and Lotus descended. The moment she stepped out, gasps rang everywhere. No matter where, divine tier summoners were at the top of the ladder. Lotus was the hottest topic in the guild and freelancing community. Seeing her in the flesh made many lift up their phones. "I forgot to wear a cap." Lotus's eyes widened. She wasn't used to this much attention. "Hey sis," Ren waved at her. At that moment a shadow appeared behind the gate. It looked like a normal human was about to emerge, but that height was odd and that aura. Lotus' expression changed instantly. "Ren, go to the car now," Lotus yelled. While the crowd was puzzled, she quickly grabbed her confused brother, his friend, dashed toward the car and threw both of them in. At that moment, Melvin, swinging the greatsword over his shoulder, walked out of the blue gate. The agents couldn't even react as small trees and blooming flowers burst out of their eyes and flesh, igniting great waves of fear in the hearts of others. Almost instantly people began to flee. Those agents were Lord-tier summoners. To kill them so easily, this existence had to be several tiers higher. Their fear only grew as more people became walking flower tree farms. It was a grotesque scene. A place filled with life a few seconds before had transformed into a graveyard clouded with fear. In a span of a few seconds, over 30 people had died. Lotus' eyes shook as the corpses blooming with beautiful flowers reflected in her pink eyes. Then, those pretty eyes that once flickered with horror narrowed with a razor-sharp gleam. Whatever is making plants grow out of people has to be in the air. This being is spreading some kind of unseen substance, but it can't get through an enclosed space. Lotus looked at her little brother who, although was horrified, wasn't a victim like the others. Putting him in the car saved his life. "The aura of this thing is strong, but I can still." Lotus summoned her mantis beside Melvin, and it swung the right blade, aiming for the paragon's neck. A fierce gale blew against the orchid mantis as a massive dragon head grotesquely made out of twisted tree roots, trunks and leaves with lots of bloomed flowers burst out of the gate. The dragon slammed its fangs down, but Layla, the orchid mantis, burst into beautiful flowers that flew in different directions, while most of it was consumed by the wood beast. Layla rematerialized beside Lotus. Not only was the orchid mantis exceptional in terms of speed, it had a skill called fake death, where it can replace itself with a bunch of flowers stuck together to look like the mantis. With a disgruntled growl, the dragon swung its tail. Lotus backflipped, transforming her hands into pinkish-white mantis blade arms the moment her feet touched the floor while Layla flickered, unleashing over a dozen cuts on the dragon's tail. The dragon's tail was sliced into different parts. Melvin's eyes narrowed. He moved. Just one step and the paragon was above Layla. Activating exchange, Lotus switched her summon, not with herself but with a projection which had equal strength to her main summon. The projection swung its blade upward to meet the paragon's downward move. Melvin slashed right through the projection's blade, swung his sword in a downward curve that went back up, slicing off the projection's head. Layla was already behind him but got swept off by the dragon's wings. As the orchid mantis slammed the jeep, sending it screeching backwards, leaving behind black marks from the tires, Lotus had positioned herself at a blind spot. She was about to lunge toward him when the dragon opened its mouth. What came out wasn't flames, but dozens of thick roots that pierced through the ground. Lotus managed to dodge, but her eyes widened as Melvin's sword inched closer and closer to her chest. Death was a swift thing. Even she, with all her reflexes and speed, did not expect to die this way. All of a sudden, something pulled her backward. Lotus realized herself when someone grabbed and slowly placed her feet on the ground. With her heart pounding so hard it hurt, she turned to her rescuer. Lotus' eyes widened involuntarily, shock sweeping over her very being as her eyes went up to meet an intimidating pair of eyes. It was dangerously similar to that of the paragon of MC, but she knew this face. His golden hair wasn't so long it hid his eyes anymore. Back then those eyes were bright, vibrant, and attractive. His face wasn't as well defined, nor was he this tall and broad-shouldered. At Brooklyn, he was too far away, unlike when they met in the Green Gate dungeon where she saved his life. If saving him from Aryan would count. Godfrey, Lotus stuttered. A malevolent roar from the wood dragon caused her hair to flutter. It began to flap its wings, generating dust and gale as it prepared to fly, only for Godfrey's eyes to lock on the beast. Sit. A telekinetic oppressive force slammed the dragon on the floor, lifted up its head, and slammed it once more. You're the one. We met quite quickly. Melvin brandished his sword, his eyes gleaming brightly. Show me how you killed my general. Godfrey activated Echo, and a longsword manifested in his right hand. Ever since he gained more control over the castle, lots of Golden Order knights walked the streets, and no one knew. Through them, he would be able to find Green Gate dungeons, but one of them had arrived here upon sensing a paragon's aura, which made him use exchange. Damn Order. If it was built by Cain, why respect it? Why be afraid to be in public when everything was just false? After all, he can't die. It wouldn't be in Cain's favor after all, and he can't be disabled. He couldn't grow stronger that way. He was a bug in Cain's world, and knowledge made him know that. The only power Cain had to manipulate him was keeping his identities a secret and allowing him to fear death like every other person. But now Godfrey knew. His eyes gleamed coldly as the dragon barreled toward him with thunderous steps. Godfrey swung downward, using the manhwa-style skill, but the golden wave unleashed by the longsword split the dragon from head to regrown tail. Melvin couldn't believe his eyes. His pupils went to his sword-wielding arm, which was sliced off by the same attack. I see, I'm facing an equal. Melvin's thoughts barely registered when pressure fell on him. It came with a feeling he had not felt since he gained intelligence by the blessing of mana. It was fear, as Godfrey was behind him. Equal? You are not my equal, Godfrey declared with a mini-sun in the middle of his palm. It resulted in a mighty mushroom explosion that shook the district. A pair of golden glowing eyes pierced through the smoke fog, staring at the corpse on the floor. Even after taking the brunt blow of a condensed sun's flames enough to affect the space around it like the true sun, the paragon lost his head alone. His body was scorched black, but it was only the place Godfrey struck directly that was incinerated, a testament to the durability of paragons. Melvin's body collapsed, and light came out of his corpse, forming a diamond-shaped core the length of an adult's index thumb. Godfrey raised an eyebrow. He squatted, stretched his hand, picked up the core with his index and thumb fingers, then brought it closer to his face. There's no doubt, this is like a dungeon core but much stronger. The energy from this thing is incredible. Now that I think about it, the bosses in Green Gates have dungeon cores, a means for them to invade our world. Some of them were chained, likely forced into invading. His eyes gleamed. I see now. I've always wondered how someone can invade another world. Turns out it's a perk for a paragon. That would explain how Cain went to the Patan world. He was already a paragon back then. Paragons have mana cores and can form a lower core of their own that allows them to breach worlds. It also means killing them is a means to grow stronger, even faster. He summoned Solstice and tossed the core over to him. Use it, Godfrey muttered with a low, deep tone. Light spread from Solstice's gauntleted hand that held the diamond core to the rest of his body. His aura grew immensely as he rose from 19.8, breaking past his limit of 22. As his tier soared, his pauldrons grew bigger like shields and a cloak manifested, connecting to both thick pauldrons and a golden chain that connected the cloak, resting on the top side of his chest plate. A red plume appeared on his jagged draconic helmet. Metal clinked as Solstice went on one knee. "You've restored me your mage, my prince." Godfrey glanced at him from the corner of his eyes as he rose from his squatting position. A translucent monument appeared beside Solstice. It was only visible to his eyes. Before he would have to go to the castle to check for what changed, but now it came to him, though no one else except him could view it. Name: Dragon Knight of the Golden Order. Type: Hybrid. Tier: 24.5. Potential: 28. Description: A Knight General, Dragon Lord of the Sun, twin blade of 100 suns, comet of annihilation and destruction. Can wield flames of the origin sun, the hottest flames ever seen. Master of the dual sword style. In blackout state, this general can choose to transform into the sun dragon, becoming a living, breathing sun in the shape of a monster. Peak level origin tier with a peak level paragon potential, worthy of a general. Godfrey complimented inwardly. After he unlocked Isald, luckily, he gained 10% from symbiosis and earned the strength of a 25-tier paragon. Always being in blackout state made him a 26-tier powerhouse with the blackout abilities of his knights at the back of his palm. Now with Solstice rising, his strength has increased once again. It pleased him that his generals weren't much weaker, but he might have to focus on Isald from now on in order to unlock the next door. Because behind that door were the alchemists, all 9 of them including the chief alchemists, and once that door was unlocked, he would gain the title of king. There was also that sealed knight and that unknown king. Godfrey knew something was odd because when he stared at that shadow being seated on the throne, it stared back. There was much to do, and no one was going to tell him how to do it, or when, because he would achieve them all. Now that he knew about paragons, they were his target. Green gates were too slow. However, this also meant he as a paragon could journey into other worlds, but they would consider him a dungeon boss. And it also meant he could be hunted. After all, paragons were great sources of power. If I had known about this, I wouldn't have argued with Isald and gone straight to South Korea. Godfrey sighed but didn't feel that bad. It was strange, but the castle just gave him information. His normal elite knights had risen from 10,000 to 12,000. If he were to add that with what Ballista, Lament, and Mountain could summon, the number of knights under him might be closing in on 50,000. And that was without Isald's army of dragons. I almost fear what I'll become. Yes, I should fear myself alone. Godfrey finalized his thoughts. He dismissed Solstice and finally scanned his surroundings. That mini-sun ball had opened a crater 300 feet deep and a kilometer wide. There were almost no residential buildings around this place, so at least innocent lives weren't lost, but someone was absolutely frightened to her core. When Lotus saw Godfrey emerging from the great amount of smoke still rising into the sky, her pupils trembled. Had it not been for her quick reflexes and speed in being able to push the jeep away, both she and her brother would have been dust. Godfrey, Lotus bit her lips as she stared boldly at the man emerging from the smoke. His eyes tore through the smoke fog. It was scary, she admitted inwardly, but they shared a past. A life-and-death one. She had watched him punch off the head of a giant, decimate an army of minotaurs, fight an ever-growing forest army, but not once had she found this chance to meet him one-on-one like back then. Is she a clone? There's a 50% chance she might be one, a false human. Kane might be watching me through her eyes. Godfrey's eyes gleamed coldly. I'm sorry about Isald. I know she meant a lot too. Lotus paused as Godfrey simply walked past her without a glance. Lotus blinked, she turned. Her brother, who watched everything from the jeep, felt pity for his elder sister. She told him how she met the golden vagabond when he had not become the golden vagabond. This might be stupid coming from me, but don't jump into fights, you'll lose, Godfrey paused and said. Lotus' eyes widened. You're also doing well, Lotus. Keep it up. He left. This hunt won't stop. Lotus sighed as she looked at the cluster of media professionals outside the doors of her guild's headquarters. Going home wasn't possible anymore. They even pestered her brother and his best friend, seeking answers to what happened to the Feral Wolf dungeon. This was the first time the world was witnessing a blue gate closing. It brought more attention to Lotus in a span of hours. A paragon tier being appeared in Manhattan. That was horrifying news that made everyone tremble in their shoes, but the twist was that this same class of being that ruined Incheon was killed immediately after it came out of the dungeon. Who in Manhattan could do such a thing? Who could kill a paragon tier existence? Arthur Pendragon had been quiet since the death of his daughter, so it couldn't be him. Even if it was, no one would miss a 14-headed gigantic dragon flying over Manhattan. Its roars itself were louder than explosions. It won't until they get what they want. These people are difficult to get rid of. Johan, who sat on an office chair, replied. They were currently in his office. You must have called me because of this, right? Lotus turned to him. We can't have the world think you're a paragon tier summoner. Do you know what it means to be the only official paragon tier summoner in the U.S.? We have a wealthy number of top-level summoners, but no paragon tier summoner. We might have bragged about Adam, but who knows where he is, and he also wrote that he couldn't exceed the divine tier. You want me to talk? Lotus spoke up to stop her guild master's ramblings. Johan finally looked at her with a small smile. Yes, I am also curious. Lotus lowered her head. The thing that came out of that forest could have turned Manhattan into a garden of beautiful flowers growing on corpses in mere days, if not less. Johan's eyes widened. I couldn't stop it. I'm just a divine tier. I can exchange blows with some origin tiers, but I'm nothing before that thing. I watched it turn 30 people into living fertilizers. Plants grew out of their bodies until they couldn't hold on anymore and died. It was horrible. Lotus covered her mouth. A being of that class wiped the floor with origin tier best summoners, and they have one of the best abilities. That's the only reason they survived. It's a miracle you're alive, Johan said with a relieved tone. Lotus looked at him. I'll do it. Since they want to know so much, I'll tell them. Very well then. Johan rose to his feet and escorted her down the elevator. The moment Lotus came out, reporters were hanging around, some even having their meals dashed toward her like flies. In a blink of an eye, cameras and microphones had formed a semicircle around Lotus, Johan and a few other guild members, Charles and Falco being amongst them. You want to know what happened? I believe we all do. Are you a paragon tier summoner? Why have you been hiding this? Nathan, the popular streamer, asked. After hitting it big, he made sure things like this didn't escape him. Had it not been for the toxic substance the demon paragon released, he would have live-streamed everything. The world was counting on him. Of course, he tried a face mask. It didn't work. He had to spend quite the sum to visit a summoner that could restore his youthfulness. The entire world is watching you live, Miss Lotus. Nathan pressed on. I didn't kill the paragon, it was his doing. Lotus responded. Everyone was confused and they looked back to see if she referred to something behind them. Who? Nathan asked. You know who I'm talking about. Nathan's eyes widened. Wait, him, the Golden Knight Summoner. The same man who has the highest number of freaking strong summons, who killed the Limitless Summon, the youngest widower to exist. Everyone looked at Nathan, who kept rambling titles nonstop. Even Lotus didn't know what to make of Nathan. What about the people who were there? A female reporter asked. They died. Plants grew out of their corpses the moment the paragon came out of the dungeon, Lotus responded. But your brother survived. Lotus' eyes narrowed. I took him and his friend to my car. I almost died fighting that thing. She glared at the reporter. We couldn't find their corpses. Their families deserved to bury their loved ones. Lotus' eyes sharpened. So you want to accuse him of being inconsiderate? This entire city would have been a graveyard had it not been for his quick intervention. We would have become the next Inchin, but with the greatest death count the world has ever witnessed from a dungeon, because that being came out of the dungeon, and there wasn't a sign of a dungeon break. You should be happy you're alive and not try to get twisted stories published. But you're speaking about a vagabond, a man who has killed hundreds at a very young age. He must have a motive. Lotus went back in, ignoring their questions. Meanwhile, outside, Nathan turned to the screen. You've heard it, guys. Godfrey Daniels vanquished a paragon tier threat. That guy is just unbelievable. Highlight the next most dangerous dungeon. I'll be there, and I bet we'll see the Golden Summoner King. That was a good name. Nathan ignored the glares he received from other reporters. His only regret was that he didn't stream that fight. It would have boosted his subscribers. This Godfrey was his lucky charm. Today it's official. Godfrey Daniels is the U.S. first Paragon tier summoner. The dude is a literal nuke at this point. What do you think? The moment Godfrey walked into the Pendragon Mansion's third sitting room, he found Isald looking at a tablet with a solemn face. I figured out something. Godfrey, your father is back. Isald interjected with a piece of news Godfrey never expected to hear in his entire life. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.